can you just reassure people that this voting by mail, and just explain it, because I think at least the calls that have you got, Rosemary, I know you've gotten calls. Steve, have you got any?
Got a couple of emails.
Yeah, and Bill, I don't know if you've
We've
got.
got a couple of emails.
So just kind of give us the rundown, Deb, if
Yep.
you would. Thanks.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I'm going to start by saying that there are other townships who have chosen to move to mail balloting for 2020. In fact, some of them met up until Tuesday night. Tuesday was the last day, 90 days prior to the primary election was the last day for a municipality to decide if they wanted to move to mail balloting or make any changes to their mail balloting plan. So far, we've been notified that the following townships are also moving to mail ballot for 2020 elections only, similar to what we did with the unorganized territory. Bay Lake Township, Center Township, Fairfield Township, Irondale Township, Lake Edward Township, Long Lake Township, Oak Lawn, and Wolford. Those townships have all, their township boards voted to switch to mail balloting for the primary and general elections for 2020, whether it was for considerations of voter safety, election judge concerns, or their polling place concerns to accommodate social distancing. They don't have to have a reason why they're moving to mail balloting. All of their resolutions did note that they were going to be for the 2020 elections only, similar to what we did with unorganized territory precincts. So, along with the 18 other precincts that we have that have already historically been voting exclusively by mail, this is another 11 precincts that will have voting by mail for this election cycle.
And Deb, just to let the public know that this is not something that just happened. I mean, in the past, for years and years and years, there's been how many precincts have voted by mail?
We have had 18 precincts. As of 2018, we had 18 precincts that voted by mail, including small cities and townships across the county. Some of them have been doing this since 1996, I believe, was the earliest that we had some of our precincts that were doing, maybe even a little bit earlier, maybe 94 election. It's been authorized in the statute since 1988. So there are some areas in Minnesota who have been voting exclusively by mail since that time frame. The 18 precincts that we have are anything from voter count of about 40 to voter count of about 300 is where we were at with those 18 precincts prior to this year. And though it seems like we've only had one circumstance where a precinct had been mail ballot, a new council came on board and they wanted to vote back in the polling place again. So they changed their action. This was the city of Garrison a number of years ago. They had been mail ballot. Council came on board and decided they wanted to vote in person. And they switched back to in-person voting for one election cycle and then switched back to mail balloting again. So there is opportunity for those precincts who are voting by mail. They can make that choice to rescind back to going back to a polling location. And Garrison is the only one who has made that choice in the past here in Crow Wing County and then went back to mail balloting again after one election. How can I reassure people? I can tell you the facts of what we do and what the law allows, and everybody has to take their own take of what that is.
Deb, why don't you explain how it works? Okay, so
Yep.
Here's the ballot. It's in the big manila envelope. Okay, so tell what's in there and how it's sent out. And once I get it and I'm sitting at my kitchen table, what I have to do if
Yep.
if I live by myself, I've got to find somebody to verify.
You have to find a witness.
So if you could just explain the whole.
So I'm going to go even a step further
Okay,
back, because
perfect.
we don't just mail out ballots willy-nilly.
Right.
The people that are mailed ballots in the first place are ones who are already registered voters in that precincts, which means they've registered to vote, their social security or their driver's license ID number has been verified through the checks and balances that way. They've gone through the verification with Department of Health and with the court system. So people who are committed or who have a felony conviction that does not allow them to vote, they don't get sent a ballot. Somebody who is dead does not get sent a ballot. We get daily reports from the Department of Health, and we update our records. Our voter registration records are updated on a daily basis. So if somebody moves out of state, the other state that they move to and register to vote sends us updated information. We remove or we inactivate their record here in Crow Wing County at that point in time. If Department of Health tells us that somebody has passed away, we inactivate their voter registration records so that they are not sent a ballot. When ballots are mailed out, they are sent out with a pre-filled information on the return envelope itself. The voter's name and the voter's address that they are currently registered at are filled out already on a label on the return envelope. So the packet comes with the ballot, instructions on how to mark the ballot, just like you would get from the election judges in the polling place on election day. You know, they tell you to make sure that you are filling in the oval completely, only vote for the number of candidates you can vote for each office. There also comes with a secrecy envelope, which is usually tan in color. The voter puts their marked ballot into that secrecy envelope, and then the return envelope, which is pre-postage addressed to our office. You're exactly right, Commissioner Coring. In order to vote by mail or by absentee ballot, you have to have a witness. And the witness can either be a registered voter in Minnesota or someone who can witness an oath, like a notary public or a postal official. You could take it to the post office if you wish to do so. But for your witness has to verify that you are the person whose name is pre-printed on that envelope, on that return envelope. So if they don't know you personally, they have to see identification from you to make sure that you are the person that is what's listed there. That witness is also verifying that the ballot was blank before you filled it out. So they're verifying that you are the person who is marking your ballot yourself and that you filled it out by yourself or with allowable assistance as what's allowed by law. So the witness has an oath that they are signing and attesting to as well. So when the voter receives their ballot packet and they have their witness, the voter marks their ballot. They place the ballot into the secrecy envelope so nobody sees how they mark their ballot. That ballot secrecy envelope goes inside of the return envelope or the white envelope. You'll see two different colors of envelopes in their packet. The voter has to sign their name with that oath that you sign when you go to the polling place, that you're at least 18 years old, that you're eligible to vote, that you're not convicted of a felony where you haven't completed your sentence, and that you reside where you say you reside, where you're registered at. And they sign that envelope, which is the same thing as their oath that they sign at the polling place. The witness then has to put in their name, their address, their Minnesota street address. They're attesting to the fact that the voter is who they are, that the voter showed them the blank ballot prior to being marked, and that the voter was the one who marked it themselves. And the witness has to sign that envelope as well. When the ballot is returned to our office, when they come in the mail, they're immediately stamped on the day that they are received, and they are updated in our statewide voter registration system. So I, as the voter, can go on to the Minnesota Votes website to track the status of my ballot. I can see the date that my ballot is mailed out from our office. I know when I should be able to expect it in my mailbox. We've sent them a letter letting them know these are the date ranges that we'll be sending ballots. So if they're concerned about whether or not it's in their mailbox or not, they know what dates those are being sent out. I can track to see when it's been received. So we receive them, we sort them by precinct, and we lock them in a locked vault. Every 3 days or every 5 days, depending on which time frame that we're in prior to election day, and honestly in this election cycle it might be every day, election judges of two different parties working in teams of two review those ballot envelopes that have come back. And what they're reviewing it for is the voter's name on the label the same as the voter's signature? Did the same person sign the envelope? Is that voter's ballot? And does the witness have their information completely filled out correctly as well? Name, address, and signature. If it meets those criteria, the election judges both agree, they're accepting. They mark that envelope, that return envelope, as accepted, and they both initial it. That's updated then into our statewide voter registration system. So now I, as the voter, know that my ballot's been received by the office and accepted by election judges. And again, they're sorted and filed and locked in a locked vault until we can start processing them. Now, legislation that just got signed by the governor on Tuesday now gives us 14 days instead of 7 days to start processing those ballots. Once that processing time starts, then we again have election judges or election staff who are responsible for counting to make sure we have the right number of envelopes for that precinct. We run reports to make sure our numbers balance and match. Once we're agreed that those numbers balance, they open the white envelopes, the return envelopes, and take the secrecy envelopes out. The secrecy envelopes are not opened at this point. They're just separated into two different piles. Once we've taken all the identifying information envelopes away, the return envelopes, and filed them somewhere else, the secrecy envelopes are shuffled up, and then opened, and the ballots are removed. So we have no idea of knowing which ballot was from which voter or anything at that point in time. Then the election judges are initialing the ballots, and then they are being processed through the tabulators at that point in time. No results are received, or no results are accumulated or reported until after 8 o'clock on election night. So even though we can start processing these 14 days before and we can run them in through the tabulator, there's no results or information that is available to us or to the public or to anybody else prior to 8 p.m. when we close the polls.
So elaborate on that a little bit. So you're feeding them through there, you're seeing the numbers, and Paul Coring's running behind.
We're not seeing the numbers.
You don't see the numbers.
We don't see the numbers at all.
You don't call up Paul Coring
All I
and
know
say,
is that Long Lake Township should have 32 ballots, and I have 32 ballots for Long Lake Township. That's the only thing I see. I don't see any candidate information. We can't see any of that until it is reported. And the reports are time-stamped, so I can't run the reports prior to 8 o'clock on election day. We physically don't have that opportunity to do so, because then those election judges are also responsible for filling out the summary statements that says all these rules and regulations were followed for that process.
Okay.
What other questions can I answer for you all on that?
Wow, see, she knows what she's talking about.
You tried last time
I
at
tried
the
it when
canvas
I was
board.
on the canvassing board. I asked you 8 ways to Sunday about fraud, because I worry about fraud. And I would prefer that we have a picture ID for voting here in Minnesota, but apparently smarter minds than mine think that's a bad idea. But you know, I know that I had a close election one time, and it was only 138 votes. And so when you're saying the witness has to have I can't just say, oh, here, I'm going to witness this myself and just scribble something. I have to put my address so you know who that person is that's witnessing this ballot.
Yes, we have to know the name and address of the witness. If it is not a registered Minnesota voter, if you're using a notary public or a postal official or someone who can witness an oath, they have to put their stamp. They actually have to physically have their stamp. If the witness address is not filled in, the ballot gets rejected. If the witness signature is not filled in, the ballot gets rejected. If the witness signature is not noticeably different from the voter signature, as in if I tried to scribble my own signature as my own witness, the ballot gets rejected by those judges of 2 different political parties that are working together. Now, if your ballot gets rejected for any reason, we're required by law to send you a new ballot with a letter explaining why your ballot was rejected. You don't get your old ballot back. We've now rejected the ID number that is associated with that ballot, but you are sent a new ballot with a letter telling you why the ballot was rejected by the election judges, including a photocopy that is highlighted if it is a case of the witness didn't fill something in or the voter forgot to sign or whatever it might be, so you can see where that error was, and then the voter has the opportunity to re-vote. A couple of other things with regard to the rejected ballots: if it is within 3 days of election day, we are required to call you if we reject your ballot, so that you have the opportunity to come in person if you want to. So that's the other part with mail ballots. There is still a polling place for voters who vote in a mail ballot precinct. They can still come to the courthouse here as their polling place. If they don't have a witness available to them, they can come to our office and we can serve as their witness. If they bring a mail ballot in and they want to revote it, we will spoil the ballot that they brought in. If they've already marked it and bring it in all sealed up and want us to be their witness, we will not witness it for them. We will spoil that ballot. We will give them a new blank ballot that we, as the witness, are seeing as a blank ballot and allow them to vote it and cast it at that point. The other piece that goes along with the mail ballot situation is that there are I want people to know that there are checks and balances that are in this process all the way through. So when we talk about that we're running reports, we have a number of reports that we run on a daily basis. The ability to make sure that if I'm supposed to have 50 ballots for this precinct, that I only have 50 ballots for this precinct, or that I do have 50 ballots for this precinct, is critical. So we are constantly, on a daily basis and several times throughout the day, making sure that our numbers match up to what they need to be.
Okay, so I've got a hypothetical question.
I
So-
love those.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's say, you know Grandma Johnson, who I always bring up. Let's say I vote for too high of a levy increase.
That was Jones.
Well, Jones Johnson, close. It's a
She got
cousin.
remarried.
Okay, so let's say I vote for too high of a levy increase, and Grandma Johnson is mad at Paul Coring, and Grandma Johnson runs against me. And it's getting down, it's election day, and Grandma Johnson has 100 votes, and Paul Coring has 100 votes, and it's a tie, and let's say Grandpa Johnson comes in, he didn't send his ballot in, he's gonna come in, and it's election night, and he comes running in the door, and it's 5 minutes after 8 with his ballot. What do you do with that ballot?
If it's 5 minutes after 8 when he comes in, the ballot is rejected. Polls close at 8 p.m., and we do not accept any ballots here after 8 o'clock. Now,
After 8
if
o'clock.
Grandpa Jones is in line, waiting to hand his ballot in at the counter, just like he would be in the polling place if
Yeah.
he was in line at 8:05, or if he's in line at 8 o'clock,
8 o'clock.
he can hand his ballot in.
Okay.
But if he doesn't get through the courthouse doors and in line before 8 o'clock, the ballot is not counted.
So if I'm sitting there and I got my foot out, then if he's trying to get to the counter.
That would not be very smart of you.
That's
However, I will
just-
say,
Just being,
here's the other thing I will say, regardless if you're voting in person or through the mail, you will not know that it's 100 to 100 prior to 8 o'clock on election day. So
Good.
you would not know that you and Grandma Johnson are neck and
and
neck
nobody,
at that point in
nobody
time.
knows that.
Nobody knows any results prior to 8 p.m. on election day.
Okay, and I want to point out too that you said that there are two people, one identifies themselves as a Republican, and one identifies themselves as a Democrat, and they're both.
One identifies with one political party and one identifies with another political party.
Correct.
Remember, there are 4 major parties in Minnesota now.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a Republican and a Democrat. You might have a Republican and a Legal Marijuana Now party, or you might have a Republican and a Democrat, or you might have a Democrat and a grassroots legalized cannabis party. You know, there are 4 major parties, but judges who are working the absentee ballot board must declare a political party preference. So while there is an opportunity for you to work in the polling place as an unaffiliated judge, you don't have to declare a political party preference to work in a polling place, as long as we have that balance of other voters, or of other judges, who are declaring party. Working with the absentee process, they have to declare a political party for that, and they have to be matched up in opposite
These
parties.
people aren't staff people working for Crow
Some
Wing
of them
County.
are staff people working. When we get to the opening and processing and feeding through the equipment, Nick and his team, you want to know how you get really good results with election accuracy from making sure we have 50 ballots and 50 ballots, is you put finance people who are really good attention to
Yeah.
detail as part of that. However, the ones who are doing the accepting and rejecting are election judges of 2 different political parties.
And I would just point out too that the reason why the county board, who is the township board for unorganized territory, why we made that decision is because of this crazy coronavirus stuff, and the polling places were uncertain whether or not they wanted the public in there. That's one reason, correct?
We did receive notice from polling places we heard from 2 of our 3 polling places for our unorganized territory that they were okay with us being there. However, we were going to need to make modifications for the polling place at the red precinct. Yes.
And then, as people know, a lot of our election judges are retired people, and a lot of them, Deb, were uncomfortable being an election judge this year, so we are struggling to find worker bees
Yes.
to even conduct an election,
Yes.
correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay,
Rosemary?
one thing that has been posed to me by a constituent is, what if you get your ballot in the mail and you mail it back in, and then you come up and try to vote? Is there any possibility that you can double vote?
So when I talk about the fact that there is a ballot ID that is assigned with each one, if I'm such a control freak, but there is a ballot ID assigned with every record that is within our statewide voter registration system. So if you live in the blue precinct and you are mailed a ballot, that ballot has a ballot record ID. If you come into the courthouse and you say you want to vote, the first thing you have to do is fill out an application. Even if you're a mail ballot voter and you come to the courthouse, you may be required to fill out an application if you want to vote in person here through that process. The application, or even if we look you up to spoil your other ballot, is already going to tell us that you have returned your ballot and you cannot vote again in person. If it is before the 14 days and it's in accepted status and it's before the 14 days, they could say, well, I changed my mind. I want to vote for somebody different than what I cast my ballot for. There is an affidavit that they can sign that would spoil that ballot. We physically would take that ballot out of our locked vault. It would be spoiled, it would be rejected and spoiled, and then they could be issued another ballot. One vote per person, one ballot that is accepted per person. After that 14 days, they cannot make any changes at that point in time. That clawback period goes away. And I will tell you, the clawback issue, we have had one, maybe two circumstances that somebody's ever asked to claw back their ballot because they changed their mind. And it was with a local race that occurred in a precinct.
Thank you.
We do have some FAQs about mail balloting, some of these same things that I talked about, and I think I provided all of you with a copy of those FAQs that we have posted. It's posted on our website, it's on our social media channels. We will be providing it also to the press so we can get some publication around that to help people understand what the mail ballot process looks like and how those safeguards are in place. And that's there for people to have if they have questions also.
Okay, I've got another one that's going to throw you for a loop.
Bring it.
This is
Okay.
the one.
Huh?
This is the one you
This
got.
is the
Never
one.
thrown her
I'm going to
yet.
throw you for a loop now. Okay. So I know for some reason we got a new mail person down where I live, and sometimes it takes a long. Oh, somebody was sending me a check. They mailed it from Brainerd on May 1st, and I didn't get it till the 5th. 5 days. Okay, so let's go back to what I said about.
Yep.
I'm running.
805?
Grandma
Yep.
Johnson is running, it's 100 to 100, and somebody else has mailed in their ballot, and it's postmarked 3 days before the election, but we don't get it here delivered until a day after the election. What are you going to do, Deb?
That ballot is rejected. Ballots cannot be postmarked. Ballots have to be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day. So included in your instructions that you get with your mail ballot, it will say, postal times may take up to 3 to 5 days. Please
Right.
make sure you mail your ballot timely or return it in person. You can bring your own voted ballot into our office and hand it to somebody at the counter. If it's already been voted and witnessed, you can turn it in person, kind of like a Dropbox standpoint of things. However, you can also return a ballot for somebody else, but only 3 voters in an election. And you have to sign an affidavit if you are returning a ballot for somebody else, saying who the person is that you're returning the ballot for and who you are as the agent who is returning that. You cannot be a candidate. You cannot be the agent or the employer of the person that you are being the agent for. So ballot harvesting is another thing that you hear.
Yeah.
Well, people are just collecting all these ballots and they're changing them, and I'll return it for you, but they're changing them in that process. One person can only return a ballot for 3 other voters in an election, and you must sign an affidavit and keep a listing of who are you returning a ballot for and how many ballots have you returned. And we have a log that we track that information on
Against voter harvesting.
against voter harvesting.
Darn it.
Sorry.
I thought I had you. I thought I had you
There are
cornered.
some states who do allow for postmarks. So remember, we do not have a federal election system. Every state makes their own laws as it governs elections. And the locals are the ones who administer the laws that the state has set out. Minnesota's law says your ballot must be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day. So while there are some states who allow for postmarked ballots to be counted after Election Day, that is not the case in Minnesota.
You know, I want you to repeat that, because that was something that somebody said, why is the federal government dictating how we're going to vote? I said, no, that isn't how it works. So every single state has different voting laws and standards of how they vote, and the federal government is not dictating to us on
Correct.
how we're going to conduct an election.
Correct. So the Federal Elections Assistance Commission, they do set best practices, they do set guidelines, they do set equipment certification standards. If you recall, after Bush, Gore, Florida, Hanging Chad, that whole debacle that nobody ever wants to revisit again, the standards of what minimum levels of what equipment have to meet are set at the federal level. But the states also have to do their own state certification of equipment. So while there are some states that allow for touchscreen voting, Minnesota does not allow for touchscreen voting. We use a paper ballot that is filled out and tabulated with paper ballots, so that we also have that paper trail, if you will, that by law, we are required to go back after Election Day and count 2 precincts by hand to make sure that those ballots were counted, that the machines counted the ballots the way that they were marked.
Okay, I hope I'm not prolonging this. I apologize to the commissioners for that, but, okay, so one other question. So, Deb, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reassure the public that this is not, there's not going to be any funny business.
Correct.
At least here in Crow Wing County.
Correct.
Minneapolis, I don't know. Okay, so you are in control of all your ballots. I mean, if you know that 20,000 ballots have to be sent out, you know that, okay? So what happens, and this probably could never happen, but let's say the election's over with, and you go, Deb's kind of re-looking at the thing after it's all over with, and you go, sent out 20,000 ballots, but yet there was 20,200 votes. That could never happen.
That could never happen in my world. For one thing, before the votes are certified or before the votes are canvassed by you as the canvassing board, we have 2 members from the county board who sit on the canvassing board. And in our case, when the election judges from the polling locations bring their materials back on election day, there's a certification that I send. When I send out the ballots, I sent you 2,000 ballots.
Right.
That's signed off by me. 2 judges have to sign off on that morning. When they open those ballots, they have to count to make sure that they had 2,000 ballots. That's what they got from me. So I signed it to say, I sent you 2,000 ballots. They're signing it to say, we got 2,000 ballots. At the end of the night, those judges, again, even in the polling places, they're working in different political parties. We have party balance in those polling places. They're certifying 2,000 ballots are coming back.
And then the machine is sitting there, and you've got 2,000 ballots, and you have to put it in there right away. You put it in there, and there's 1,600 ballots that go in there. They have to account for those other 400 ballots. It isn't in somebody's trunk somewhere.
Not in somebody's trunk, and I'll come back to that. They have to account for the other 400 ballots that were not used either. So when they're accounting for ballots, they're accounting for the ones that are in the machine that were voted by voters. They're counting for the ones that are in the spoiled ballot envelope. If a voter makes a mistake in a polling place and asks for a new ballot, they're provided a new one. That one is spoiled. They have to count the number of ballots that are in there. They have to count individually the number of ballots that are in the pack on the table that they haven't handed out yet on election night. And they have to account for the ones that they never opened that are still in the plastic wrap. They have to account for all of those. When they check in on the second floor, when they come here, we do not upload their results until our staff verifies that, number one, they did their math right, because let's face it, they started at 5:30 in the morning and it's now 10:30 at night. That is a long day. And what's the easiest thing to do when you're at the end of a long day? 2 stinking ballots stick together and your count comes off. And we don't like counts to be off, so if your number is not exactly 2,000 sent out, 2,000 returned when you come back, we're going to find out why it's not, and the election judges are going to be here to help correct what that issue is.
So one more question, and then I'm done. Okay, so you've been doing this for a long time, and I've tried to stump you in the past, but apparently I can't. Is there anything that you think Crow Wing County or the state of Minnesota is doing wrong, or we could do different to ensure that the voters are confident of the outcome of an election? Do you think that, I just don't, the way you've explained it to me at the canvassing board and here, I just don't know how somebody, I think the voter ID thing is a good idea, where you have to see a picture ID, but I just don't know where the fraud could happen. Do you think there's any way that there could be fraudulent stuff happening?
I think that first of all, that Minnesota is one of the gold standards across the country as far as how we run our elections. Having that paper ballot, having that trail, that whole process, the chain of command of what we do with as far as chain of custody for how things are in and out, we have very, very good best practices that have been honed through decades of work under secretaries who are both Republicans and Democrats. So it really makes no difference who's in control, if you will, from that standpoint. I think our local officials do a great job of trying to make sure that we are practicing consistent practices across the state. That's one of the things our county groups have worked on, is making sure that we are trying to make sure that the voter experience in Crow Wing County is the same as the voter experience in Hennepin County and Lake of the Woods County. You are a Minnesota voter, you should have the same rights to that. I think there's always room for improvement. You know, we have some technology that allows for real-time connectivity in the polling place on election day. Right now, we're taking all the records out of the statewide voter registration system, downloading them onto the iPads, and sending them out to the polling place. Part of our safeguard is they cannot be connected to the internet on election day. That is a safeguard that is there. However, another safeguard that is in place could also be, if they were connected, I would know if Steve Barrows went into Baxter City Hall and then went to the city of Brainerd to do election day registration. Because we do have election day registration, people do have that opportunity to vote on election day. While that might fix some of those issues on election day, those issues are very, very few, if any, that we ever find across the state. So
I know I promised that was the last question, but another question came up. Okay, so you got to reiterate that you are not connected to the internet.
Correct.
When so nobody can, the Russians or the Bulgaria, nobody can hack in and change the results. So
correct.
You get the results over here, and then when this is not connected to the internet.
Correct.
And then you get those results and you come in here, you go into the Jinx Ferrari room, then you put those results in and send them to the Secretary of State at that point, correct?
So I get the results that come on a little thumb drive from the polling locations. They come on a flash card, a SD card. I put them into a different computer that I can accumulate all of that results and create the file to send to the Secretary of State's office. That computer doesn't even have the ability to connect to the internet. It has been completely hardened that computer that's accumulating all those results has no connectivity at all. Once I've created that file, I put a one-time use thumb drive into that machine, download that file, put it into this laptop to upload it to the Secretary of State's office. That then goes in a box to be stored for 22 months and destroyed. It gets used one time. We do not cross the two things back and forth. There is no connectivity to the internet to allow the Russians to hack in. And if they did, remember, we have paper ballots. We are going back and verifying those results to make sure that what was reported by the machines is what was on the ballots.
There you go, Bill. See,
What
I
else you
told
got?
you, Bill. I told you, Bill.
Man, I trust you, Paul.
I laid awake all night trying to think of ways to stump Deb on this thing, but can't do it. Deb, I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
That was very thorough. I hope there's a few people watching. I hope Chelsea's watching, and I hope that will.
And you're watching now.
Yeah, I'm hoping they'll put a story in there, because I just want the voters to be assured that the decision that this board made is, we're confident. I'm confident, you know. So anyway, anything else budget-wise? Anything else county commissioner-wise?
I'm good.
Good to go.
Okay, very good meeting. Meeting's adjourned.